Okay, so good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. My name's David Goodman. I'm the director of the China Studies Center. Before I start, may I acknowledge the land of the university on which the University of Sydney is based, which is the land of the people of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. This is land which was never ceded or sold. We recognize their rights of their elders, past, present, and emerging, to land, water, and air. This is the second of three webinars on women in China, ably organized by Dr. Minglu Chan of the University of Sydney. I'm going to hand over in a minute to Professor Louise Edwards, who is one of the most famous academics working on the topic of women in China, who is currently at the University of New South Wales when she's not actually in Melbourne. Anyhow, I'm now going to hand over to her and she will introduce Jin Sung and we'll go on from there. Before I do that though, can I remind you that when you want to ask questions, as we will have time for towards the end, please use the Q&A facility on the bottom of your screen. That way it will be easier to organize. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks very much, David. And thank you for inviting me to chair these sessions, and Minglu and Yanping for organising as well. It's a really great honour to be involved with University of Sydney China Research Centre. And today, following on from a really stimulating presentation that we had from Jiang Xinghui last week on quotas and politics and how women negotiate political administration in China, we've got a really great seminar coming up today from Jing Sung from the Chinese University of Hong Kong on property and how that really important asset, probably most families' most important asset, property, gets allocated between male and female family members. And what Jing Sung's going to explore for us is how transfer of property is impacting gender relations. How strong is patriarchy in relation to the new customs and government policies around family property structures. Now, our speaker, Jing Sung, is an associate professor of gender studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and also an associate researcher at Shenzhen's Research Institute, also a branch of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I believe. She secured a BA and an MA in sociology from Peking University, and her PhD in sociology followed at Brown University in the US. Her focus on gender and family issues is particularly interested in work, property, and political participation, as well as how gender roles and family lives have been shaped by migration, urbanization, and market transition. And just the sheer quality and quantity of her publications is something that I think all of us are, we really take our hats off to Jing. This is quite amazing. She's published in prestige journals like China Quarterly, Journal of Contemporary China, American Behavioral Scientist, Urban Studies, Journal of Rural Studies, and as well as Housing Studies, Population, and the Journal of Sociology. She also has a book that came out in 2017 with Routledge called Gender and Employment in Rural China. So you can see that this is an extremely well-published and expert researcher on this topic that we're going to learn about today on how property and gender intersect. So I'll turn it over to you now, Jing. And as David said, we'll have time at the end for questions. Please put them in the Q&A and I'll try and moderate them and get them to some sort of semblance of order maybe for Jing during that last section. We've only got an hour, so we will be, really targeting the time. Okay, over to you, Jing.
Thank you, Louis. So, and thank you, Minglu, for organizing this very important seminar series. And I think everybody can hear me well now, right? So I'm going to continue with my talk about women's entitlement in China's urbanization, division of relocated housing properties. So the research background is in China's rapid urbanization. And the key question, as we just discussed with a few colleagues, will patriarchy be undermined in not only urbanization, but also modernization, but also socioeconomic development in general? So the research context is in rural communities. We care about how rural communities will change over time because of their long-standing patriarchal property structures regarding land, regarding housing, regarding other production materials. So previous studies have focused on how compensation is distributed within communities. And the existing studies have pointed to that how the community level mechanism of redistribution in fact reinforce the gender order. So now when we move on from turning from the community level analysis to family level analysis, I also want to ask how relocated housing properties are distributed within families. And does that kind of gender relations, family dynamics reflect a new trend or reinforcing the existing socioeconomic inequality? So I'm going to quote on two existing papers. One is about the gender access to relocation housing in urban sprawl, survey results from Ningxia. And the other is a recently published paper on cherished sons and considerate daughters claims to resettlement housing in the urbanizing Eastern China, which is in Shandong. So you might wonder which part will be more conservative and which part will be more progressive or more gender equal in terms of family division of labor. So we are going to look at the interesting outcome consequences of urbanization in both Ningxia and Shandong. Okay, so let me quickly talk about the study in Ningxia, how it draws on survey results from 74 extended families. And all the family members, around 300 family members in these extended families are included in the survey data set, each being treated as a unit in housing demolishing and relocation. So that's why we use these households as the basic unit of analysis, because they were treated as the basic unit of relocation. Because housing demolition was conducted at this family level, and because compensation was calculated at the family level. So even if some family members are already adult children, they were still part of the family when compensation was calculated. So these families were sampled from rural communities in the expanding city of Yingchuan, the capital city of Ningxia Autonomous Region in northwestern China. The study pulls all the family members in the extended families and examines how the access to relocation housing is shaped by gender and family structures. So the up right-hand side picture is the map showing you where Ningxia is and where Yingchuan is and where our field site is. And the bottom side, right-hand side picture is in fact a picture of the relocation housing neighborhood where the villagers moved into after their self-built rural housing were demolished in urbanization. So here are a list of variables, the independent variables and dependent variables. So for dependent variables, we basically focus on relocation housing on the one hand and commercial housing on the other hand. So here are the descriptive statistics for all family members. And there are a lot of mixed families, which means they have both sons and daughters. And there are also some sons only or daughters only families, which means the family only have sons and only have daughters. So we want to take into consideration not only the general or usual socioeconomic factors or demographic factors will affect how much relocation housing they will get in urbanization, but also family structures also may play an important role. And these are the descriptive statistics for children. So we have a separate sample for children only, excluding parents.
Jing,
Okay.
are you sharing your screen?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
yes.
Can anyone see it? Or am I the only one that can?
I can see
Can
you.
you?
Okay, it's my problem. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, so just let me know if there are any problems, or I can refresh my page. Okay, so we are going to quickly look at the model results, and then we can move on to the more qualitative case studies. So for the quantitative models, first we look at the sample with all family members. And clearly you can see the gender effect is very significant, that being a woman is related with a reduced chance to receive relocation housing units or floor space. So being a woman is negatively related to the housing properties being received. And also regarding family structure, being in a sons-only family is positively related to the chance of receiving housing being relocated. But we are going to see later that it has different effects for men and for women. And education has a positive effect, age has a positive effect. So this is the model results for all family members. Now let's look at the male sample and the female sample. So for the male sample, it is quite consistent with the baseline model that being in a sons-only family is positively related to the chance of receiving more relocated housing units or floor space. And marriage is a positive predictor. So we want to remember this because later on we are going to see a reverse effects in another model. So for men, marriage is a very positive predictor. Education is a positive predictor. But for female sample, all these effects, the education effects, the marriage effects, the family structure effects no longer exist. So women will not benefit from being married or being highly educated or being in certain kind of family structure. So in other words, women's disadvantage persists across different kinds of family structures. So to summarize, in the sample of all family members, men tend to have more relocation housing properties than women, but this gender effect does not hold for commercial housing. For family structure, being in a son-only family has a positive effect on receiving more relocation housing. And being in a daughter-only family has a positive effect on receiving more commercial housing. And education, age, they all have a positive effect on receiving more commercial housing. And for men, they benefited from the family structure effect, which means if they are in a sons-only family, they will receive more relocation housing. But if they are in daughter-only family, they will receive more commercial housing. Being married is a positive predictor. Being highly educated is a positive predictor. But for women, we do not see any significant positive effects from family structure, marital status, education, and age. Now, next step, we are going to look at the sample with all children, parents excluded. So very similar to the everybody included the baseline model, that gender still have a negative effect, which means being a woman is negatively associated with the chance of receiving more relocation housing. And family structures is the same. The sons-only family continue to be the one who has the most positive effect on receiving more relocation housing on average. And education has a positive effect. Age has a positive effect. So the next step, we are going to look at the male sample and the female sample. For male children, it is very obvious that they are the ones who benefited from being sons-only families. But if you look at the female children sample, family structure does not have a significant effect. And being married is a negative predictor, which means being married is a very bad thing in this case. So being married is a negative predictor for receiving relocated housing. Okay, so we have finished looking at the quantitative regression models. So to summarize, for children's sample, for gender effect, men tend to have more relocation housing properties, but not for commercial housing. For family structures, being in sons-only families is related to a greater chance of receiving relocation or commercial housing. Education has a positive effect. Age has a positive effect. And for sons, the family structure have a very strong, significant effect, but not for daughters. For daughters, being married is a negative predictor. They lead to a reduced chance of receiving relocation housing. So I have summarized the gender effect and the family structure effect for our survey results. So from this quantitative analysis in the field site in Ningxia, we can find that both gender and family structures matter in shaping family property structures. Men tended to receive more relocation housing across different families, and their benefits are especially significant in son-only families. Age, education, marital status show positive effects in some cases, but less so for women. And marital status has a negative impact on daughters. And women's disadvantage holds across different families. So it's about gender, but it's not only about gender, it's also about family structures. So based on these quantitative research findings in mind, we want to look at how it works, how the grassroots mechanism played out, interact with each other to shape this kind of outcomes. So compared with the field site in Ningxia, which was relocated in 2000s and early 2010s, the field site in Shandong, the villages there were relocated in the late 2020s, was a latecomer in urbanization. So we find that similarly, the gender effects is persistent. Daughters in families with mixed or big families were less likely to receive relocation housing. So we want to look at how the gender effects may be different in different kinds of family structures, because we have very detailed case studies from Shandong. So we divide our samples into big mixed families, small mixed families, daughter-only families, and son-only families. So now let's first look at our first category, big mixed family. So mixed family means the family has sons and daughters. So it is interesting to see that the parents usually will say that I needed to retain at least one housing unit for myself, but for the remaining, I'm going to selflessly distribute to my children because I'm the household head. So I show my devotion to family utility, to the well-being of my children via kind of sacrifice or compromise. But they're not favoring their sons and daughters equally. So let's look at what is going on in big mixed families. So case one, you can see from the diagram, the case one, this family received 6 housing units. So if you have 6 housing units and you have one eldest daughter and 2 sons, how would you divide your housing units? So in this case, I already labeled in the diagram that the elder son received 3 and the younger son received 2 and the daughter received 0. So according to the parents, they said, my elder son paid for the extra floor space. So it was quite fair. My younger son will not complain. My younger son regards it very fair. My daughter is filial and considerate, and she would not want properties. She would not worry her parents. She would not make trouble in the family. So they consider this is a moral virtue as a woman for not arguing for any properties titles from the natal family. So this is the first case. The second case, how about if the family only has one son, will the daughter have a greater chance to receive more housing units? So similarly, this family also received 6 housing units, and the parents also retained 1 housing unit for themselves. For the remaining 5 housing units, they distributed to their son, and the elder daughters received nothing. So this is how the parents justified their redistribution. We thought about giving some to our daughters, but that would leave my son with only 3 units. Too few. How he would be angry for losing so many housing units. If we had only 1 daughter, it would be okay to give her 1 unit, and my son still had 4 units. But we had 2 daughters, So we would rather give them nothing. So you can think about it's not only the moral expectation, it's also about what is sufficient and what is scarce, what is enough and what is not enough is a quite subjective criteria. They will consider giving 3 units to son as too few and giving 1 unit to daughter as too many. So this is what is happening in big mixed families. Now let's look at the small mixed families. So in small mixed families, case 3, in case 3, the parents admitted that the elder daughter contributed more to the caregiving than the younger son in the natal family, and they generously gave 1 out of 10 housing units to the daughter. And the parents said it's the parents' responsibility to give most housing to the son. And if you want to rely on your son for elderly care, even though the daughter has been the main caregiver, they still said that it is our moral responsibility and it's our practical concern that we need to favor our son. Otherwise, we are going to be in trouble. We are going to be in trouble. So so they already consider themselves being very fair and generous by giving some 1 out of 10 housing units to the daughter. So this is case 3. For case 4, they also have 1 son and 1 daughter, and the daughter was also the main caregiver. The daughter started working earlier, had been contributing to the natal family, and contributed her income to build the house for her parents, because she said it is my responsibility to be filial, and I want my parents to live in a spacious, good housing. But I did not expect that my parents will give all the relocation housing to my brother, who contributed nothing to the housing construction of the old home. So the daughter was shocked when her parents gave her nothing, as her family's home was built using her money. So she appealed to the governments and courts, but it is difficult to turn family affairs into lawsuits. So she did not find a way to claim her entitlement, even though she was not satisfied. So this was in small mixed families. Okay, so now we still have 2 other categories. One is son-only families, and the other is daughter-only families. So for son-only families, we find that the narratives are quite different. The narratives shifted from being favoring sons to being egalitarian, because they don't have daughters. So the only concerns is how to distribute it between sons. So they really, really care about being egalitarian. They cared a lot about being egalitarian. The case 5, the parents had received 6 housing units, and it become a difficult problem. If they keep 1 unit, there will be it will be difficult to divide the remaining 5 units evenly between the 2 sons. 1 son will have an extra unit, and the other son will be mad. So the parents decide to give 2 units to each of the sons, so they have no complaint. So the parents had 2 units at hand in order to have an even number to distribute them to the 2 sons. So this is case 5. Case 6 is a little bit different. So this shows that why egalitarian principle is so emphasized, because the 2 sons have very different socioeconomic status. The elder son is very good at business. It has a very successful career. The younger son has not found a formal job. He tried many careers, but he continued failing. So the parents were really worried, and the parents want to lay a good foundation, economic foundation, so that he could find a wife. So they want to really make a difference for the life of the younger son. They want to narrow the financial gap between the 2 sons. So the parents justified their decision as it would not help a lot to give my elder son an extra housing unit, but it would make a big difference for my younger son. So the parents retained 1 unit, and they give the elder son 2 units, and they give 3 housing units to the younger son. So the elder son was so mad. The elder son was so annoyed, and there was a big fight between the brothers and within the family. So at the end, guess what they did? The parents had to promise, the parents had to put their elder son's name on the housing ownership certificate on their own housing unit, the only housing unit that the parents had. So they promised that when after we die, you will have the housing unit. So that's how they solve the problem, to be extremely equal. So even though parents under urbanization, they will emphasize, oh, some children need to be taken good care of. Somebody has great needs to receive more compensation, and some people are weaker than the others. But still, in the son-only families, being egalitarian is very much emphasized to avoid family disputes and family tensions. So this is what is happening in son-only families. Now let's look at daughter-only families. In daughter-only families, things are a little bit different. So let's look at case 7. Case 7, the parents only have 2 daughters, and the parents received 5 units. And the parents had 1 unit, and the other 4 units were evenly distributed between the 2 daughters. Even though the elder daughter was the main caregiver in the natal family, providing elderly support. So the parents said, properties can be counted, but emotion and heart cannot be quantified. So they really talk about, when they are daughters, they talk about mores, they talk about being virtuous women, but when they're only sons, they talk about being egalitarian. So, and the elder daughter did not complain, but she's still kind of, she's not very happy, but she can accept that. So she said, I do not want to have disputes with my parents and my sister. Family harmony is the most important. So this is how they justify the equal distribution of family properties in daughter-only families. The reasons, the justifications are different from other families with different family structures. But there are some cases, okay, around less than half of the daughter-only families, if the parents decided to allow one of the daughter to be the female heir, then it became natural to bias toward the female heir in the distribution of housing properties. So look at case 8. They received 6 housing units. The parents had 1 unit, and they gave all the remaining 5 units to the eldest daughter because all properties, they said, belong to my eldest daughter. That's why she found a married-in husband. The other 2 daughters could marry in other ways, as long as we have 1 daughter staying with us. And their younger sisters expected little, so they did not argue at all. They accepted, and they regard this as being very fair. They were aware of the intensified responsibilities in exchange for favorable treatments. Okay, so after looking at these different kinds of families, we want to summarize not only the quantitative, but also the qualitative analysis. So in general, we can see that in Shandong or in Ningxia, patriarchal traditions remained influential. Under patriarchal traditions, only sons are eligible to gain residential land. If you know the name, it's called 宅基地 from rural communities. And the presence of sons contributes to the expansion of the family's self-residence, because the parents then will be motivated to build more and more housing in order to attract a bride to marry into the family. So this is a traditional practice. So that is why at the beginning of urbanization, when there's land development, when there's housing demolishing, when there's housing relocation, of course, sons only families will benefit more. They are better prepared. They have more self-built housing, and they will receive more relocation housing. So the effects of family structures also reflect this kind of patriarchal traditions. But as time goes on, and in the latecomers of the urbanization, when things changed a little bit, when some families realized that they can also invest more in their housing construction, regardless of family structures, in order to get more compensation. And when when the governments also adjusted their relocation policy in order to mute or in order to soothe the grassroots disputes, they tend to be more generous in redistributing housing properties. So the effects of family structures also suggest how families may adapt their division of properties due to their new desires and needs. The new desires including recognizing the children who had made more contribution to the natal family, including to take care of children who are less was economically established in the urbanization. And for example, the new desire to house their children in the future when there's no the self-built housing was no longer available after urbanization. So every villagers are in need of their own individual urban homes in an era of urbanization. So these new desires and needs may force these families to adapt their division of properties. So as the relocation properties shifted from a more strict to a more loosened approach to soothe grassroots discontents, and as families invested more in housing regardless of sibling structures, women might also claim some relocation housing, especially women in families with daughters only. So we also see some situations in which women can benefit from or claim some share in the family division of properties by voicing their contribution to the family, or when they have a small sibling size, or become the heir of the family, given the loosened compensation policies and depending on the availability of housing resources. There are situations when there are practical needs to take care of other children, to take care of most children, if not only the sons. So the study points to gender inequalities in accessing housing properties as a combined outcome of government policies and family relations. So in short, patriarchal traditions remain influential, but parents or families also recognize the new desires and the practical needs to adjust the family division of labor. But that does not change the overall picture that even if the parents say we are very generous in giving our daughters some properties, that's a small share in their family properties. But if they only have daughters, it is possible, it is more likely to divide the relocation housing properties equally, or passing on all the properties to the female heir because the male heir is absent. Okay, so this is the main conclusion. And thank you for listening to the talk. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your comments, suggestions, and questions.